Okay, so it's 9 PM on a Sunday night, so this is normally when we do our how-to series. If you're not familiar with it, you can scroll back on the page and have a look. Last week we did how to feed your fish and the best way of getting the best growth to colour out your fish. The week before we did how to stock a 500 litre reef aquarium with a mixed reef tank. So you can have a look through. We've been doing these how-tos for quite a while now, and we cover a little subject each week. But not this week. This week there's been some quite major news within the industry. It's going to have quite a profound effect on the industry going forward from this point. Nothing's going to ever be quite the same as it is now. So with something so big going on, we thought we'll suspend the how-to for a week and we'll just go into it a little bit more depth on explaining exactly what has happened and why it's happened, and how that's affecting things now and how that will affect things going forward in the future for the UK marine fish market and of course globally as well. So we're going to go through that. We're also going to go through how this is going to affect our pledge, and also how it's going to affect the UK wholesale market. And certainly this could have quite a big effect for one UK wholesaler in particular, which we're going to talk about and name and go through later in the video as well. So just bear with me. This is probably something I'm not going to cover in 10 minutes, so you might have to sit through a bit of me waffling on, because it is quite a big complicated subject and I want to try and give it as much time as I can. I've certainly got my views on the issue. It's quite controversial, it's a very divisive issue, and so that could be quite controversial. Not everyone's going to agree with what I have to say, but here at Salt Revolution we're never afraid to say what we think, and so we're going to go on with it. So first we're going to take a look at what has happened. Okay, so just a few days ago, the Supreme Court has ruled that the government in Hawaii has not been doing ecological studies when it's been handing out permits for people to collect fish. So they've decided that the permits have just been handed out willy-nilly, and they haven't really done any kind of studies on the impact that this fishing is having on the Hawaiian fishery. And until the study's done, there is a complete ban on export of marine fish out of Hawaii. It's obviously quite a major thing. It's going to be going on for quite a while. Personally, and this may seem a little odd thing to say, but personally I think this is actually a good thing. It's a warning shot for the hobby, and this is something that has been in the pipeline for many years now. It's something that really could have been foreseen, and it's nearly happened several times before. It's been foreseen for quite a while, and more could have been done to prevent the ban going into place than has been. I would like to add the caveat, obviously, if you're a fisherman in Hawaii, you're a wholesale business in Hawaii, obviously no one wants to see people suffer and lose their businesses and things like this. And you know, my heart do go out genuinely to the people that are personally affected by this. No one wants to see people go through hardship like this. It's a horrible thing to happen to them. However, there are larger issues at play, and I think overall, on balance, the ban is probably a good thing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little look at some of the history of what's led up to the ban, and I try and keep it independent. I have my own views on it. I'm going to try and keep the sort of background fair as independent as I can, ish, and just give you a sort of little rundown of what's been happening in Hawaii that's led to this situation first of all. Okay, so we're going to have a little look at the history of some of the key events that have led up to this happening. Obviously I'm trying to compress 40 years of commercial fishing into Hawaii into a few minutes, so I can't go into huge detail on it. There's been quite a long running controversy in Hawaii between two groups mostly. You've got the ones that obviously catch fish for the ornamental trade and export them. It's a very large part of Hawaii's income and one of its few major exports as well. So it's a major source of income for the state, and obviously a lot of people depend on it for their livelihoods and everything else, as we said before. So obviously they're very pro the fishing being done, and generally they have been historically very pro on it being done without too much regulation and things. Certainly in the US model there tends to always be less regulation than we're familiar with here in Europe, where in Europe everything tends to be much more tightly regulated than it does in the States, say, in general terms. So they've been very pro the fishing be allowed to carry on and things. On the other side you've got the tourism and diving industry, and obviously as far as they're concerned they want the reefs in absolutely pristine condition. When they're taking tourists out to do diving, they don't want to see divers within eye line catching fish and taking them away out to sea. You know, they want to be able to show all their tourists a thriving natural ecosystem and a wildlife resort. So you've got two very opposed groups there, and it is very difficult to get much common ground between the two, which is why it's obviously been quite controversial. It's a very divisive issue in Hawaii as well. Quite a lot of the population in favour one way, quite a lot of population in favour the other way, and so this has been rumbling on for quite a long while. Now, as far as the controversy goes, traditionally there was about 60 or 70 species of fish which were caught in Hawaiian waters. Now, out of those 60 or 70 fish, a lot of those can be caught elsewhere as well. Okay, and a lot of those were caught in very small numbers and had very little impact on the local ecosystem. For example, in the shop here, my own personal pets, I have got two Panther Groupers, which are Hawaiian originally, came from Apex Marines, imported from Hawaii back in 2015. Obviously Panther Groupers are very widespread all the way through the Indo-Pacific. They're not under any major pressure. They're also captive bred on a massive commercial scale. We've got captive bred ones here as well. And so collecting those from Hawaii was only really done on a fairly small scale. It didn't have any impact on the species as a whole, either globally or locally even. So that is an example there of a fish that's been caught in Hawaiian waters, fairly small numbers, fairly sustainable way, no real danger to the species, no real danger of local extinction. So that is something that isn't really too controversial, I would say. Of the 60 or 70 species, though, there is quite a few of those which are endemic to Hawaii. Now, these are ones, strictly speaking, the word endemic means you could get them from Hawaii and nowhere else. But in practical terms, there's also quite a few that you pretty much regard as endemic to Hawaii. In that, Hawaii might hold, say, 50%, or in some cases even over 90% of the entire world population of that species. So although you might get the odd one crop up elsewhere, that is primarily where they come from. And obviously for something like that, conservation of that species is much more important, because Hawaii is effectively deciding on how the world treats that one species. So off the back of that, year before last, they brought in the Hawaiian Whitelist. Now, first of all, they were looking at a blacklist, and in that they were just going to blacklist various species and just say, you can't catch species X, Y, and Z. But because of the huge numbers of species in Hawaiian waters, and of course a lot of those were in very low numbers, they didn't want people to rush out and catch, say, all the Hawaiian dwarf spotted puffers, which are quite rare in those waters. They're currently not fished on a very big scale, but it was feared that if they weren't included on a blacklist, then there could be uncontrolled pillaging of those, say. So instead of doing a blacklist and banning species for export, what they then did instead was create a whitelist. Now, the whitelist details the only species which can be exported from Hawaii. Now, on this list there was 40 species of fish. Some of those can be caught elsewhere, such as Achilles tangs, which are relatively common in Hawaiian waters. But having said that, most specimens tend these days to be coming from Christmas Island or Tahiti, and I'd say the majority of the ones caught in the wild probably come from Tahiti, where they're much more common. So there's some species on the list such as the Achilles tang, and then there are some species where they're pretty much only in Hawaiian waters, like the yellow tang, which has a huge distribution area, but well over 95% of the world population, it's believed, live only within the few thousand square miles of Hawaii's coastlines. So they brought in the whitelist, okay, so this meant that you could only export those 40 species. Now some things then effectively became banned. Hawaiian cleaner wrasse, you don't really get them anywhere else. Occasionally you get one throw up in say Tonga or somewhere, drift in the current or whatever. They're very rare anywhere else. So this effectively meant that species like the Hawaiian cleaner wrasse were then gone for the hobby for good. Given that it's quite an important species in its ecosystem, and it's a species very vulnerable to overfishing, and they were caught in big numbers, this is a good thing. I think most people could agree that the banning of the Hawaiian cleaner wrasse was probably a good thing. So this left 40 species on the whitelist, and this was later reduced, I think, last year to 38. There's quite a lot of data to remember in this. If I do make the odd mistake, please forgive me, bear with me. I'm trying to remember all of it as I rattle it all off. So that was then compressed, a couple of species were dropped out, and it was reduced down to 38 species being exported from Hawaii. Now, out of the 38 species, 37 species of those account for around 40% of the total fish take, and 60% of the take is on a single species. Okay, so, and the single species mentioned was yellow tang, a very iconic fish for Hawaii. They often have it on flags, things like that. You know, very, very iconic fish for those waters. So, of the other species on the fish list, a lot of those aren't being fished in major numbers. Things like the Achilles tang can easily be caught elsewhere as well. So nobody was too focused on the other 37 species of the 38 that was on the whitelist. And I'd say that the bulk of the controversy surrounding it is on the yellow tang. Okay, so we're going a little bit more depth on the yellow tang specifically. So, fishing of yellow tangs in Hawaiian waters began in the 1970s, and in the 1970s they were taking around 20 to 30,000 yellow tangs a year from the wild. Okay, now the wild population at that time was estimated to be around 25 to 30 million, I think, from memory. So we're talking about 0.1% of the population of yellow tangs being caught each year. Okay, so very small number. Obviously not as many people kept marines back then, so it didn't have a big impact on the fishery. However, since then, the number of yellow tangs caught each year has increased year on year on year. And I think last year we were nudging over 300,000 towards 400,000 yellow tangs caught. And again, this is quite a big number, but there are a lot of yellow tangs, so it doesn't seem too bad. However, the problem with yellow tangs in particular is they're very difficult to breed in captivity. And even when they can be bred in captivity, it's very expensive to breed them in captivity. So although there's been some brilliant work done by universities on breeding yellow tangs, they've been coming through in very small numbers. You're talking singles initially, then it's the tens and the hundreds. But compared to the third of a million or so being caught each year from the wild, their contribution was very, very small. It isn't economically viable to breed the yellow tang in captivity, so they could only do it because they're getting subsidised from the Hawaiian government to do so, and it would never really be a meaningful replacement for wild fish. There's a lot of complicated reasons as to why this would never be possible. Mostly it centres around two issues. They take a very long time, they're very slow growing, they're very time intensive to rear, so that makes it very expensive to rear. And secondly, they're extremely similar behaviourally and morphology to the black tang and the gem tang. So if you've got all the skill and the expertise to breed a yellow tang, then you wouldn't waste your time realistically breeding yellow tangs. You'd be breeding black tangs or gem tangs, which are worth many hundreds more on the wholesale price, and obviously you get better return on your money. So yeah, here we have it, the yellow tang. It is a species that's not in the foreseeable future going to realistically be bred in captivity in any numbers because it's not viable. Secondly, it's a species that takes 5 years to reach sexual maturity, so it's a very slow reproducing species. Recruitment, which is how many new specimens of that species survive planktonic and become little fishes basically each year, is very, very low as a percentage of the population compared to most other marine fishes. A lot of marine fishes can triple or quadruple their numbers in 12 months if the opportunity, if they have a big catastrophe and they need to bring their numbers back, they've got the capability to do so. Yellow tangs very much not. They take a very long time to reach sexual maturity, and then when they do reach sexual maturity, they do live for quite a long age, but the relative number of eggs produced is relatively small compared to a lot of other species. And because of the unique characteristics of Hawaii, a lot of the larvae do drift away into the abyss and never settle out on a reef or get to grow. So there's quite a lot of peculiarities with yellow tangs in particular on this. So the world population at this time, they estimate at around 20 million. It's down from sort of 25, 30. And while there is absolutely no risk of the species going extinct, the drop in numbers is becoming quite marked, which is why the Supreme Court had concerns. Now, the other thing is the numbers do mask things a little bit. So when we go back to the 1970s, we'll find that the majority of the yellow tangs in the surveys were generally in the sort of 4 to 7 inch range. They were breeding size adults and they were reproducing. So the bulk of the specimens of the species were breeding adults. When you look at more recent data, which again is a little bit open to interpretation, but it seems to show that the vast majority of the species that are living today are juveniles. Okay, so the vast majority of the shows are often 2 to 3 inch individuals which haven't bred yet. And why is this important? Obviously it's quite significant because what we are catching previously in years gone by was fish that have already had a chance to live in the sea for a very long time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. They've already done their bit in producing offspring for the next generation. However, what is mainly being caught now, and if you've been going to local shops recently and over the last 10 years or so, you'll see the majority of the yellow tangs off for sale are around 2 inches in size. Now these are fish that are getting caught from the wild before they've even had the opportunity to breed. Now obviously if you keep taking all the young ones from the wild in quite large numbers, there's going to be very few adults going forward. So we're now at a situation where there's quite a large number of elderly ones and there's quite a large number of juvenile ones, but there's not many actually breeding. So although the numbers overall haven't fallen that much, it's actually a lot more of a fragile situation than it looks. Also you find that as the yellow tang numbers have been dropping off, it's been quite localised in the areas it's been happening. So this isn't a sort of 10-20% drop across the whole region. There's some islands have had the populations pretty much decimated. Some areas where the yellow tang was forming, sort of 80-90%, some people say, of the population of the fish on the reef, they're now down to like 5-10% because as their numbers get hit, they get replaced in the ecosystem with things like coal tangs and things like that, which take over then as the dominant species because they're not being targeted by fishermen so heavily. So it makes it even harder for the yellow tangs to spring back because they get more competition. So this is why at first it seems like the numbers are quite solid, but actually when you dig a little bit deeper, they're a little bit more fragile than the overall numbers suggest. And this was the thoughts basically of the Supreme Court, that not enough really has been done to study it. Now there was also a little while back, 2-3 years ago now, they had a referendum in Hawaii on whether the fishing should be allowed to continue or not, and it actually came out with a majority decision of the islanders voting for a ban or a limiting of the collection, which was not really expected. There was quite a powerful lobby group from the collectors and that to try and get as many votes as they could. Despite that, they lost. However, when that then went to the government of Hawaii, they then decided that the poll, given that they didn't get the result they were expecting, I guess, was not legally binding, and they basically just ignored it. So it's things like this that have angered the environmentalists so heavily. Big figures like Snorkel Bob and things have been very passionate about this. There's been a lot of controversy on both sides, and the discussion over it has got pretty nasty at times. You know, people's livelihood on stake, species life on stake, you know, it's just a big issue. So there's been a few other developments along the way, such as the development of the West Kona Beach Reserve, year before last, if I remember rightly, and this was seen as both sides used this as ammunition. So they established a new marine reserve on the West Kona, and they stopped fishing within that area, and when they did so, the yellow tang numbers increased within that area quite dramatically. Okay, so the people in favour of fishing said, look, these marine reserves are doing a brilliant job, and if we get a few marine reserves like this will safeguard the species. Okay, but on the other hand, the lobbyists were saying, well, you look at this, the numbers here have trebled without fishing, which therefore goes to show if we didn't have fish, the areas that are being fished, the numbers are probably only a third of what they would be if there was no fishing. So it was used as an argument both ways. Having said that, the West Kona Reserve is tiny. We're talking a few hundred metres long and I think only about 100 metres wide. So it is very, very small. We're talking about an area the size of a couple of football pitches. And most of the tangs will migrate in and out of that area anyway as part of natural migration and things. And there was certainly a lot of collectors on the edges of that zone, apparently just waiting for them to swim out and then catch them anyway. So there was quite a lot of controversy about the results overall. So as you can see, it's been a long-running problem in Hawaii, very divisive local issue there. On the one hand, you've got the economy of Hawaii and a lot of people's livelihoods depending on it. And on the other hand, you've got the future of the fishing and the reefs in general, and the yellow tang iconically held up as the main example of it. So that's sort of a brief history of where we've got to, and why the Supreme Court has ruled for a ban on it. And next we're going to take a look at what the current situation is. You can see what's currently going on there in Hawaii. Okay, so next we're going to look at the current situation in Hawaii. Now there's not a huge amount of information at the moment, so I'm just going to have to wing it on what is currently available. So the current situation is that the export of marine fish from Hawaii is banned. So this will obviously have a big effect on all the collectors who now are effectively out of jobs for the time being, and it's unclear on the current situation of some of the wholesalers in Hawaii as well, because obviously they're very dependent on the fish that are caught in Hawaii, but also a lot of them also handle fish coming in from Tonga and the Marshall Islands and other places like that as well. Now some of that goes through Hawaii, some of that goes straight through LA, so we're not sure at this time as to how that's going to affect fish from Tonga and Marshall Islands, such and things like Achilles tangs at Tahiti, flame angels at the Marshall Islands, and things like that as well. So there could be a few knock-on effects there in the short term while everyone rejiggles transportation routes and things like that, and reaches agreement with shippers to possibly bypass Hawaii if they need to, or whatever. So the current situation is the Supreme Court has ruled that the government in Hawaii is not allowed to issue any new permits until they've done the ecological study. Now this is part of federal law in the US, it applies to all the states, all the other states have already complied with this. States such as Florida, which has a marine fishing industry, they do ecological studies before permits are issued to make sure that no damage is being done. Hawaii has basically just been ignoring this as far as I can tell. And so Supreme Court stepped in and gone, hey guys, you know, you can't just keep handing out permits. We know it's a controversial issue. and no more permits to hand out, no more fishing done until the ecological study's been done. So at the moment there's no fish coming out. Any ecological study is likely to take many months, just by the nature of the study and collecting the data. Ballpark figure, my guess would be minimum 6 months, probably 18 months, maybe several years for an ecological study to be presented, would be my guess, judging on how long these things normally take to do. So it's going to be quite a long time before the fishery is opened up again, and of course if the ecological study comes back showing that there is damage, or say the reefs are being affected badly from sewage, from tourism, or hotels, or runoff, or something like that, there might even be a permanent ban. So going forward, we are going to see some fish just not available, just flat not available. Things like the Hawaiian white-spotted boxfish, you get the odd one crop up, so there is a possibility of getting the odd one. The numbers are going to be very limited on a fair few species there going forward. If you can get them elsewhere, such as yellow tangs, you can get yellow tangs in Filipino waters sometimes, but they're very rare fish there, and you appreciate that if they do catch one, even at current prices, they would retail at several £100s each for a Filipino one, just because they're so rare in those waters. And obviously with demand now throttled quite heavily because so many people might want them and numbers are so limited, that price might even skyrocket more as more people try and outbid each other to get the ones they catch elsewhere. So going forward, I think there's going to be a fair few species there that are very limited in availability going forward for a very long period of time and possibly forever. And I think this should be a sort of warning shot to the rest of the hobby. There's a few other species which are a cause for concern as well, and certainly you can see Indonesia taking action on the Banggai cardinals and campaigning for those to be CITES listed. As other examples as well, there's a few fish that we don't import from various locations for these kind of reasons. So going forward, it's going to limit it. Now, in the UK, it won't affect us that badly. Hawaiian fish, probably, I would say, ballpark figure, they make up 5–10% of the fish that are available in the UK, so the vast majority of the species that people keep in their tanks, you're still going to be able to get just fine. In the US, because it's nearer to US soil, it's a little bit larger proportion. I believe it may be as high as, say, 25% of the marine fish sold in the US coming out of Hawaii. So that'll have a little bit more impact over there than it will this side of the water. So going forward, we're going to see a little bit of disruption to the UK market, but a lot of disruption to the American market, and that'll be going forward for quite some time by the look of it. So what does that mean for us? So let's have a look at how that affects us as a store and the decisions we make about various things. Okay, so obviously this is an issue which is affecting the whole hobby globally, to quite a large extent, the US to a massive extent, and the UK here not very much. How does this affect us directly as a store? The answer to that is not very much, actually. We get very few fish in from Hawaii anyway. In fact, I personally stopped importing yellow tangs because of this concern way back in 2014 because of my concerns over the fishing grounds. And at the time, I looked like a bit of a lone nutter standing up and saying, we shouldn't be doing this, guys, we shouldn't be importing these in unregulated, practically unregulated total catch numbers from Hawaii. Everyone thought I was a bit mental. A lot of people still think I'm a bit mental. You just have to roll with that. But we predicted this a very long time ago. It was an inevitable situation as far as I could see it. You just cannot go on continuously pillaging a species with such low recruitment rates like that. So as far as availability of yellow tangs goes for us, it makes no difference at all. We have never stocked them in this shop. I haven't stocked them for 3 years in the old shop. We get the old one as a trade-in from a customer. We don't import them. We have no interest in importing them, so on that it doesn't make any difference. Other species such as flame angels, we have imported the odd one from Hawaii, but I'll be honest with you, the Marshall Island ones, they're a little bit more expensive, but they're a much better fish anyway. So on things like that, we get them from somewhere else because it's a better catch location. There's a couple of things we do get from Hawaii, potters and fishes, angels, things like that, but we can get those elsewhere. So in terms of effect directly onto us, it almost no effect on our stocking at all. It might reduce the number of fish we get in a year by half a dozen individuals. And that's not species, that's half a dozen fish, which compared to the hundreds of fish we move every single month is a tiny proportion. But this leads us on to another thing, the pledge. Now when we set up Salty Revolution, we said that by 2020 we want 25% of all of our fish to be captive bred. And we want 50% of all of our corals to be cultured in store. Now it's precisely because of these kind of reasons that we pledged to do that. We could see that this was the future of the hobby. There's some areas are just being overfished, they're just being pillaged for a quick buck, and the areas, you know, they're just pillaging things like Indonesia, for example, common clowns. Some shippers are telling me they haven't got any common clowns within 10 miles of the catching station, where they've just stripped the sea bare in that local area of common clowns. So there's a few species like this that we just do not import for ethical reasons. If we get common clowns, we either get them from the Philippines, where they're not under as much pressure. If they come from Bali, we get captive breds. So there's about 8 species of fish which we keep an eye on for this kind of thing, or we have a self-imposed restriction on it. As well as that, we want to make sure that by the year 2020, 25% of all the fish that we sell in store are captive bred, because a large majority of species such as clowns and bangais and things like this can very easily be bred in captivity. It's cheap and easy to do so. There's no point in pillaging those from the wild. Captive bred fish on things like bangais generally ship better, they're healthier, they're generally a much better fish than a wild fish. So how are we getting on with that? So 25% is quite an ambitious number, and also when we did the targets originally we weren't anticipating to be as busy as we are, so we're kind of victim to our own success in some ways, because we're selling a lot more fish than we expected to when we started, which makes it even harder for us to source all those fish. As it is, we're not doing too bad. We're about 8% of all the fish that we sell in store are captive bred, and about another 1% or so are captive reared. So that is where they capture them from the sea as larvae and grow them on in captivity. So they're kind of a halfway house between wild caught and captive bred. As well as that, the culturing of the corals, I would say we're probably pushing at around 20% of all the corals that we sell in store are cultured by ourselves on site, or in Norwich rather, in our own farm, and around another 30% of the corals that we sell are cultured overseas. So predominantly the soft corals are cultured overseas, and we primarily farm some soft corals, but we also farm a lot of hard corals. Some of those are trickling through now, a lot of those we're just building up numbers. Now this is good for the future of the hobby for a good reason. It gives continuation of supply, it places less stress on wild stocks. A coral which hasn't just been shipped all the way around the world is generally going to be better settled, it's going to be more adapted to tank conditions. But the main reason we wanted to do it, originally I think that obviously it's the morally right thing to do, but also in every box of corals you'll occasionally get, not every box, but occasionally you get a coral which is just unique. It will be, say, a mushroom with a little spot and pattern that you've just never seen before. Now whenever we've got this in the past, before we had the farm, you get that one really nice mushroom rock, and somebody would be really happy, they'd come in and buy that and go in their tank, it would look fantastic. What we started doing after a little while was we decided when we get that one exceptional piece, if we can, we'll frag it into maybe half a dozen pieces, and then half a dozen people get to enjoy that really special one-off thing, you know, that unique little colour of mushroom in their tanks, and that's great, you know, because then 6 people get to enjoy it rather than one. Dale's obviously got a lot more experience in coral farming than I have, somebody who's very passionate about, and he said, you know, why don't we, instead of selling that one coal to one person or 6 people, we take that away, we farm that, we grow that, and we can supply people with that coal in small numbers, admittedly each year, but we can supply people with that one-off unique thing basically forever. And then hundreds of people get to have that really cool looking special little coral in the tanks. So this is something we're really passionate about. It is one of the main things that we set out to do when we founded Salty Revolution. There's a large part of our pledge, which you can look at on our website, www.saltyrevolution.co.uk. Go on there, you can look at our pledge. There's 5 rules that we try and stick to, do everything we can to work towards the better of the whole. So, and this also brings us round to another issue, which I'm just going to touch on lightly, and that is the UK wholesale market. Now, obviously, the ban of fish from Hawaii doesn't just affect hobbyists and shops, but it affects wholesalers too. And I was talking on Messenger to one of the probably top 5, top 10 largest wholesalers of marine fish in the UK earlier today, and I just want to say it is going to have quite an impact on what they do. Now, the wholesaler I was talking to is Eco Marines, which if you haven't heard from, it's worth having a little look at their Facebook page, look at what they stand for and what they do. And I say that they're a very ethical wholesaler. They go to extreme lengths to try and treat the fish in the very best standards that they can, and they quarantine the fish and do lots of work that's really good. But one of their main pledges, or they've got similar kind of pledges to us, and that they want to increase the amount of captive bred and ecologically sustainably caught fish to the hobby. And this is something that is crucial going forward. It's something that we feel very passionate about, both me and Dale, or Salty Revolution, and I know it's something that Laura Carlin and the others feel very passionate about at Eco Marines. And I think going forward that this is the future of the hobby. I think really that we should be working to a situation that on species where captive bred is so easily available at a competitive price on things like clowns and things like that. Unless you've got a very good reason for wanting wild ones, you should really be saying, you know, hey guys, I could have captive bred common clowns in my tank, you know, why not? Yeah, it's going to be about the same price, it might even be a little £5 more or something, but you get that lovely warm glow in your heart from knowing that you're doing what you're doing to help preserve the reefs and prevent breeding pairs being taken from the wild for not a very good reason. So this comes down to you as a hobbyist, really. So this is something that actually where we'd like you to get involved. So when you go into your local shop, what we'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is just ask what captive bred species they've got, and where you've got a choice of getting a captive bred or a wild specimen, give that captive bred specimen good consideration. You know, on some of those, I know some of the more difficult ones that are being bred in small numbers at the moment, like coral beauties, the price for a captive bred specimen can be 2 or 3 times the price for a wild specimen. And that is a harder choice to make. You know, you're talking about quite a large amount of cash coming out of your pocket to back that. So I appreciate for some people that's a little bit more difficult decision. But on a large variety of species like common clowns and Bango cardinals and things like that, captive bred ones are about the same kind of price. You're generally going to get a better, more durable fish. So what we want you to do is when you go into your local shop, all you have to do is just ask them which fish they've got that are captive bred. And when you're considering which fish to put into your tank, just give that a little bit of thought, you know. You go, I could have this species of clown, if I had that one, I could have a captive one. And I'll be doing my bit for the future of the hobby. And when you're buying that fish that's captive bred, what you're doing is you're helping support that breeder. So at the moment, that breeder might just be breeding common clowns, but if everyone starts buying these clowns, he's going to be able to have time and money to be able to breed other species as well. He'll be able to expand his operations, and the number and variety of captive bred species will increase quite dramatically. Obviously this goes for corals as well. So when you go into your local shop, ask them what captive bred species they do. They may do quite a few already, they may do very few, but if you ask the question and we get enough people asking about it, then hopefully the shops will do the right thing and head in the same kind of direction that companies like us and Eco Marines are heading in, where we want to safeguard the hobby for the future and try and get a lot of small stuff caught in a more sustainable manner that's less damaging to the wild reefs and supports local breeding operations in the UK as well as more large facilities overseas as well. So that is what we'd like you to do, really. Go into your shops and ask them the questions and see what they say, you know. And if we get enough people asking these questions in enough shops, it might increase the amount of captive bred fish sold here in the UK and globally as well. We get a few viewers overseas, quite a few viewers overseas, and if you all work together on this and you all do your little bit and just ask those questions, we can really push the hobby forward in the right direction, and it will be a lot more sustainable for everyone. And the kind of ban that we've seen, the blanket draconian measures which have just been imposed in Hawaiian waters, we're less likely to see these imposed elsewhere, and that is good for us, it's good for the hobby, and it's good for the reefs, which form a vital part of the income for the local population and source of natural beauty. We'll be back next week with our usual how-to, but in the meantime, guys, ask those questions, ask the shop, you know, if they have got some captive bred, and if you are a shop watching this actually, you have got captive bred, just put a little sticker, do me a favour, just for me, please, honestly, this week, just find out what fish you've got captive bred. It often says on the list when you buy them. Put a little sticker on the tank. Be proud of it. Show what species you've got captive bred, whether they're bred in the UK or bred abroad. Put a little sticker on there and just go, hey guys, this one is captive bred. We are doing our bit to support the hobby. And that's a nice positive message to bring out all of this for hobbyists and for shops. And let's just all work together to make sure that this little warning shot across the bows stays as a warning shot and isn't something that spreads further. Thank you very much for your support. I know it's been a very long video. If you've watched all the way to the end, fantastic, really thank you. If you like and share this video, if you're a hobbyist and you like and share this, fantastic, because several of your friends may see it, or keep Marines and bring more attention to the issue. If you're a shop and you share it, even more fantastic, because you might even bring it to an even bigger audience. So thank you very much for all your time. My name is James from Solid Revolution, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks, guys.